So we've been giving a series of talks about the Heart Sutra, which we'll be chanting at the end of today's session. So if you've missed the first few talks, I'm going to give a short review now at the beginning of this talk, and then we'll go on to the next lines. The Heart Sutra is chanted all over the world in Buddhist communities in different languages. And it's called the Heart Sutra because it supposedly encapsulates the heart of Buddhist teachings. So it's an important piece of sutra. I seem not to be able to get this thing to work for very long, but we'll see how it goes. In the first talk, we discussed the prologue of the sutra. This is a few paragraphs that we do not chant. It's not part of what we say when we chant the Heart Sutra. What it does is it sets up the sutra. It lets us know who's present for this talk. It takes place outdoors in a kind of Buddhist arena. The Buddha is there, Avalokiteshvara is there, and a bunch of other Buddhist worthies and unworthies. And among the people who are there is somebody called Shariputra, sometimes classified as a monk, sometimes as a layperson. He was one of the Buddha's major followers when the Buddha was still alive. And Avalokiteshvara and Buddha are both in deep meditation. And so after Avalokiteshvara announces that he has seen emptiness in his meditation, Shariputra asks a question. He says, okay, so you've seen this and you seem to be feeling this is very important. So having this bit of doctrine, of information, of experience, how should Buddhists discover this for themselves, and how should they practice it once they realize it? So in the portion of the sutra that we chant, we have Avalokiteshvara about the fourth line down, saying, "Oh, Shariputra." But our portion has never mentioned Shariputra. We have no idea of knowing who this person is unless we had the prologue. So she's addressing, I'm sorry, but Avalokiteshvara is sometimes referred to as a he, sometimes as a she. So we tend to call it a she. So sometimes I don't, in the sutra it's referred to as a he. So sometimes I will slip and say she, he. We'll just class Shariputra as uncertain gender, I guess, because it depends. So Shariputra is addressing, Avalokiteshvara is addressing Shariputra in this sutra. So the portion that we talked about last week, it says Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva doing deep prajnaparamita. They're telling you this teaching is coming out of deep wisdom. He clearly saw the emptiness of all the five conditions, thus completely relieving misfortune and pain. So what the sutra calls the five aggregates. The portion that we chant calls the five conditions. So this is the major insight of the sutra. And so last week we tried to talk about, so what are these aggregates, these conditions, and why is it important for Avalokiteshvara and for us to see their emptiness? So I'm not going to go in, since we just did it the last time I talked, into all these aggregates and tell you the names and to try to explain them. It's very kind of subtle and not real clear always. Instead of doing that, I'm just going to give you a brief idea of what they're talking about here. So we can think of the five aggregates as the mental processes by which we interpret the raw sensory data that we take in from the world around us. And the point of having these conditions is to let us know that what we take in is not just the way it is, that once we take in a sensory thing, we process it. And so what we get, is processed through our own mental equipment. This is why when, I look at that cushion and you look at that cushion, as long as we're not crazy, we both see approximately the same thing, but we don't see exactly the same thing because you're processing it your way and I'm processing it my way. So this is how we're modifying what we take in through the senses. So these five aggregates, or the five conditions, are the answer to this important question. If, as Avalokiteshvara says, things are empty, and you have to remember that what Buddhism means by empty, it means they're always changing, they're fleeting. And they cannot exist all by themselves, that they always exist in a context, in connection, ultimately in connection with everything else in the entire universe. So if they're empty, then what we need to know is, why do we struggle so hard to distance ourselves from the idea that they're not empty, that they're real, that, it's solid. Our senses are telling us this. So this is the point of Buddhist practice, really, to disabuse ourselves of our everyday, ordinary sense experience of the world. Not that it's not real and it's not there, but that it's the only way of experiencing the world. That it's the only point of view from which to evaluate our experience. And so this is what enlightenment is about. It's about seeing the emptiness, so you have an alternative. You have the everyday, ordinary, what in Buddhism is called the relative world. And you also have the emptiness world. And if you go only with the relative world, that's an error, because it's true, but it's not the only truth. If you go with only with the emptiness world, off in your meditation all the time and not dealing with the everyday, ordinary world, that's an error too, because it's only half the truth. They're both true, but they have to ultimately both be seen and both be seen as one, as together. So this is the point. This is the point of the sutra, because what the sutra is talking about here is emptiness, and it's helping us to adjust the distortion of our perspective that we get just by being human and having senses. We think it's real, and we think it's the only reality. So this is a kind of a mind adjustment thing, this experience of realization of the sutra. So that said, here's the lines for today with a few lines from last week. Avalokita, this is where we start chanting. You'll see at the end. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, doing deep prajna paramita, clearly saw emptiness of all the 5 conditions, thus completely relieving misfortune and pain. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form. Form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form. So, Avalokiteshvara's realization is important because although the aggregates are a way to understand how our mental processes create our delusions, so I'm having trouble seeing because this light is not working. So the teachings of the Heart Sutra on emptiness mark a new emphasis in Buddhism on understanding emptiness. This is a Mahayana belief emphasis. It's not that Theravadins do not also see this, they do. But at this point in the teachings, with this sutra, there's a new emphasis on this and the ramifications of this belief for Buddhists and what they do and what they believe and what they experience. The Theravadin way of dealing with suffering, misfortune and pain, is to deal with desire. This is what the Buddha said, the cause of suffering is desire, right? This is part of the Four Noble Truths. And so the Theravada emphasis is, okay, just get rid of all your desires, be detached, and then you won't suffer. You won't have misfortune and pain. But now this is a different look. This is a Mahayana look. And they're saying, never mind the desire so much, though these two ideas are related. But see emptiness. When you see emptiness, that will be how you'll get rid of your misfortune and pain. So one of the questions we have to answer when we take up this sutra is, Avalokiteshvara promises that we'll end our misfortune and pain. So how are we going to look at that? How much are we going to count on that? The sutra says that as a result of seeing emptiness of all the 5 conditions, then we completely relieve misfortune and pain. So this is a kind of promise. And we love this promise, right? I mean, this is why most of us joined Buddhism in the first place. We were suffering, and it seemed to be a good bet. We'll take up Buddhism and I'll be happier. I'll get rid of all the things I don't like about myself, and I'll add all these wonderful qualities like compassion and clarity and understanding, and things will be fine. And the Sutra does say completely, so that's quite a promise. But what we have to realize is this, is that none of us ever sees emptiness completely. This is a realization, this is enlightenment. So, you know, we have various degrees of insight. And even if we do have a very large insight into emptiness, we don't, it's not complete. Supposedly Buddha is the only one who has had Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that's his complete, total enlightenment. The rest of us are somewhere in line. So even if we have a very large insight, however, it's not continuous. In other words, we're not, you know, some days we're a little more, and on some issues we might be a little more clear than others. So this is an insight which fades or strengthens at various times in our life and practice. So the logic and the meditative experience behind Avalokiteshvara's claim that all misfortune and pain are relieved is based on this experience of emptiness. And so what is that logic? If everything is empty, then we ourselves are empty. So there's no self. And suffering is empty, there's no suffering. So this is the theoretical possibility here. But it's important to remember that this emptiness is not our only experience of reality. Emptiness is only one point of view, and to think that it's the only way to know reality is considered in Zen to be what's called an extreme view. To be caught in this extreme view, to see only everything as empty, is often referred to as the sickness of Zen. This is what happens, is that students come along, they meditate, they have a meditative experience of emptiness, and then they're just like totally sold on it, totally into it. And, you know, they say things like, oh, it doesn't matter what I feel, it's all empty, nothing matters. But this is an error, because there's that other side that they're not figuring in. So this is why Avalokiteshvara doesn't remain with the teachings of emptiness. He himself goes forward and begins to talk about the other side. He says, "Oh, Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness." So form is the other side. One thing it's called, it could also be called the relative. It could also be called everyday life. So he goes on to say, okay, I saw the emptiness of these 5 conditions. That was very, very important. But now what about the other part that we all experience every day of our lives? So why to bring in this form? Because from that point of view, of everyday life, the world of cats and dogs, mountains and rivers. This is also our experience. And it has to be accounted for too. We're not crazy because we see a real world with real things and real people, and that we feel like a self. I mean, it's a delusion in a way, but it's not only a delusion based on something. So to be a materialist and only cling to this world of form, this is also an extreme view in Buddhism. Buddhism calls it a delusion. So having begun with the realization of emptiness, Avalokiteshvara then goes on to teach how emptiness and form fit together. In one of our chants, not the Heart Sutra, but another one, it says, they fit together like a box and its lid. They fit together like two arrows meeting in midair. So Avalokiteshvara now is going to talk about this form. So when we hear that misfortune and pain are relieved, we need to know that our actual relief is likely to be very partial. So if you've come here thinking all pain will go away in your life, forget it. So the sutra continues its teaching, discussing the relationship of these two different points of view between emptiness and its opposite form. So when Avalokiteshvara says, O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form, then continues on, form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form. This is the heart of the Heart Sutra. And this is the core of Buddhist belief. So we've spoken in the past about how scholars and commentators have pored over this Heart Sutra and have various opinions about every single word. You know, I was telling you how the first line of the prologue is, thus I have heard, and how they parse the first word, thus. Does it mean what it ordinarily means in everyday language? Or does it mean what thus sometimes means in Buddhism, as in the Buddha is sometimes called thus come one, or sometimes a Zen teacher will hold up an object and say, thus. So they're arguing about that. Then the next word is I, thus I have heard. There's a whole bunch of discussion about who this I is, who's hearing. You know, is it the audience at the talk? Or, is it some neutral person who's now reporting it? We don't, they don't agree on that. And then heard, they also argue about heard. Does it mean, they got the sound in their ear? Or does it mean they've heard it in the sense of Buddhist hearing? Like we sometimes say in English, I hear you. It means I understand you, I get it. So what kind of heard are they talking about here? Just physical hearing or some kind of insight? So you can imagine if all these commentators have gone to town on this one little 4-word introduction, what they have done with these lines of form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Lots of room here for interpretation. So I am not going to go into all the various ways people have talked about it, but we will talk about it a bit. So this section of the sutra refers back again to the aggregates, and the aggregates being empty, because form is the first aggregate. So he is returning here to talk about these aggregates a little bit. Form is the most obvious of the aggregates because it's the only one that's actual physical material. The teaching supposes that once you understand how form works, that you will be able to understand the more subtle aggregates. Some of the other, Avalokiteshvara actually mentions them later in the sutra. Some of them are discrimination, feeling, consciousness. So later on we'll talk about them when we come to that part of the sutra. So in saying that form is no other than emptiness, and emptiness no other than form, form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form. The sutra is not just saying that there is form and it has the quality of being empty. It's saying that form is emptiness itself, that you can't have form without emptiness. Emptiness is the final nature of form. But it does not cancel the conventional existence of form. It's not saying that form doesn't exist. It's also saying that emptiness is not a thing. So it's saying that form is not just material, it also exists because of emptiness. But emptiness is not a thing. It's not something we can pull out from form and say, oh, here's emptiness, let's look at that. Form can't exist without emptiness, but also emptiness cannot exist, does not exist without form. It only exists because it's a quality of form. So it's a little more complicated than it sometimes seems if you just read the words. Form and emptiness are intrinsically one. There's actually a saying in Zen about the relative and the absolute, or form and emptiness. It says, not one, they're not one, they're not two. So the sutra wants to avoid these extreme positions. Of everything is empty and there's only emptiness and nothing is real, or the other position that all that exists is the material world. Either of these errors is just as harmful as the other. Sometimes Zen students get the idea that it would be more holy and more spiritual to feel that emptiness is all that exists. But that is just as much of an error and just as harmful as feeling that the material world is all that exists. You've got to somehow hold both of these things in your mind at once. Empty, also real. In the Relative and Absolute Sutra, it says, to be attached to things is illusion. So that would be the error of the materialist. And then the next line says, to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. To be only attached to the world of emptiness, this also is not it, not the whole truth. So that's all I'm going to try to cover today. It's a little hard to take it all in if we talk about too much in one talk. Next week, Avalokiteshvara continues his teaching by saying this. Here's where he goes back to naming the 5 aggregates. Sensation, conception, discrimination, awareness are likewise like this. These are, the form is the first aggregate, these are the other aggregates. Having just discussed form as the most obvious of the 5 aggregates, he expands his teaching to list the other aggregates. He tells us that they are likewise like this. That is, they are like form. They are empty. So in the next talk, we'll discuss this line along with the line that follows. The line that follows goes like this: O Shariputra, all dharmas are forms of emptiness, not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. So we'll talk about this list of no, 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 not, and how it fits into this teaching of emptiness.